Hi everyone, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, thank you for joining me. If you're not new here, thank you for joining me again. I have been MIA for about a couple of months. I think the last time I vlogged was in April when I went on my Cape Town trip. Sorry, I'm still recovering from COVID. Um, yeah, I've been away. Part of it has been intentional, part of it has been unintentional. A lot, a lot has happened in my life since the wedding. Gosh, I promised myself I wouldn't get emotional at all. Okay, so basically, like life happened for me very, very quickly. Okay. Whew. Okay. So life really happened very quickly. I never in a million years thought I would actually be sitting here and talking to you guys about something as traumatic and raw as this. um, I have been very I've been a very big advocate of mental health and everything that comes with it. I never really looked at myself as someone that had any issues in life in general, but going through everything that I went through this year, I never thought that I would actually, or I never thought the importance of actually being here and wanting to speak about this. So, for those of you that follow me on Instagram, have probably seen that I lost my mother to COVID the beginning of the year, well, middle of the year, on June the 10th. And when I tell you the events leading up to our passing and everything that happened after was such a whirlwind for me, especially because I am and was her only child. I have never in a million years thought that I would even have to utter the words and have to from there on, start speaking about my mom in the third person or in the past tense rather. So basically, the last time I actually got to spend time with my mom, she came down for Mother's Day, which was on the 9th of May this year. She came, and as per usual, she was in good spirits, and there was nothing really out of the ordinary that I picked up, like in hindsight, now that I'm thinking back. Like, she was just a normal, usual self. Like, yeah, she was just my mom. I didn't think anything was wrong with her at the time. I didn't think anything was different. But things really took a left turn when she actually went back home. She left the Monday, which was the 10th of May, and almost immediately, as soon as she got back to Kimberley, because that is where she was staying at the time, because she has a business with her sister. So she moved there about 2 years ago. And it's funny because almost immediately my mother called me one day in that same week that she got back home, and she said to me that she wasn't feeling well, but she wasn't sick or anything, but she just couldn't put her finger on it, but she was not feeling well at all. And I asked, being the worrywart that I always am over my mother, I asked her, like, what is it? Do you have symptoms? Like, do you think it's COVID? Like, all the questions that you ask when you immediately think COVID. So she said she didn't feel sick. She just wasn't feeling herself at all. And then a couple of days later, she actually started showing symptoms. Coughing a lot, which was one of them, and probably one of the more serious symptoms that she had. And I was so scared, I was so worried. I was like, Mommy, you need to go and test. And at first she didn't want to test because she wasn't sure if they were even gonna test her. And I don't know, I think my mom was just in denial at the time as well, because that was the first time she caught the virus since this whole thing broke out. And she was sick for at least a whole week, coughing non-stop, until she eventually went the next Monday to go and test, and the test came back positive. And immediately I went into panic mode, and I'm like, I'm not there with her. She lives with her sister, and I'm telling her all these things to get everything. I went online, I've read things that people have suggested that help them through the virus and the sickness and whatever. And I started sending her all these pictures of everything possible that I could think of, that I could send her. And so I did. I don't know, but things just got really worse as the days went on. Eventually, I called my mom the Saturday, and I didn't actually speak to her. Now that I think of it, I didn't speak to her much that day, but my mother and I would call each other every single day, all times of the day. But our morning phone calls and evening phone calls were never missed. We never ever missed a morning phone call. We never ever missed an evening phone call. And I basically was phoning her to find out, how she's doing and to say goodnight. And basically, she's like, she's not feeling well at all. She called the ambulance and they were on their way to fetch her, and she's going to the hospital. And I start panicking almost immediately. And she's like, she's getting done. They coming to fetch her. She's packing her bags and all that stuff. So she'll speak to me as soon as she gets to the hospital. And naturally, that's all I could think of. Like, is my mother okay? Where is she now? I just want to call her. Just want to find out how she is. Is she doing okay? Is there anything I can do? Do I need to think of coming down? All these things go through my head. And I call her later on in the evening, and she's like, the nurses are busy with her. She can't really speak right now. She'll call me a bit later. And that already was like past 11 in the evening. So eventually she sends me a message. She doesn't call me, but she sends me a message later on that evening. And she says she's hooked onto a ventilator now. Well, not a ventilator, but a breathing machine, because her breathing wasn't too good at all. And I'm like, okay, but I start crying because, I'm scared. It's my mother. Like, I'm not there. I don't know. It's probably the worst feeling ever, knowing that your parent is not doing okay. and you are not able to be there with them, you know. So eventually I go to bed, and I wake up the next morning to a call from my aunt. And I'm thinking, I look at the phone call and I see my aunt's number pop up, and I'm like, what the F? I don't want to answer this phone call. I'm so nervous. What is my aunt going to tell me right now? Anyway, I pick the phone up and she's like, Jamie, your mother's been transferred to Bloemfontein Hospital because she is now a high risk patient and they don't have the facilities to care for her in Kimberley. But she's going in and they're putting her on a ventilator. And you know, I was like, I don't know what to think, honestly. I don't know what to think. I don't know how to feel. Shortly after that, I got a call from the guy that was driving the ambulance, and he's asked me, are you Francis' daughter? And I'm like, yes. And he's like, he's just dropped my mother off now, and now he's gonna call me and whatever. And which she does. And she says to me, Jamie, we have induced your mother, which means basically they've put her in a coma, so that they're able to hook on to the machines and everything. And this machine is now going to breathe for her, basically. When I tell you that I was all over the place with my emotions at the time, I didn't know what to think at all. And at that point in time, I realized that, okay, Jamie, this is it. You won't be able to speak to your mother at all up until she eventually starts getting better and stuff like that. Anyway, I couldn't go to work at all. Never mind the fact that my mother is in a completely different city or province, whatever you want to call it. I just couldn't go to work. I was not sleeping, and I wasn't eating properly. My boyfriend took me to go and stay by my aunt because I live on my own, and he just wanted me to be with people, as did my mother. And the nights leading up to my mother's passing was terrible. The first week, I kept calling the hospital every single hour of the day, asking how is she doing. Some would be bad, good news, some would be not so good news. But yeah, I was not coping at all. We're going into the second week. Eventually, I go to my doctor because at that point in time, I'm not sleeping at all. I'm not myself at all. And I needed help, basically. So he put me on some medication to sleep and, to calm myself and all kinds of things. And that was the second week. My mother's in hospital, bearing in mind that I'm not able to speak to her, I'm not able to message her, or anything like that. So I decided to go the Friday of the second week to go and see my mom, because I asked them, am I able to come and see her at least? And with COVID and everything, they're very strict. They don't allow you to come and see patients and stuff. But luckily, they were nice enough to allow me to come there. When I tell you, when I got to the hospital, my mom was in ICU. Um, and being in ICU, you're basically in your own cubicle. And I got there, and my mom was at the very first cubicle at the door, just as you come in. Anyway, they give me all the protective gear and stuff, and they told me that I could go in. That must probably have been the most difficult thing that I could ever see in my life. It was the most difficult thing that I'd ever experienced in my life. My mother was hooked up to all kinds of machines. She did not look like my mother at all. And in hindsight, when I think of it, I think to myself, was it a good idea to go and see her? Because basically, that is the last image I have of my mother since before she passed. Anyway, I went back to work the Monday. The Wednesday evening, it's around 11 o'clock, I got a call from the hospital, which usually isn't a very good thing. And the nurse phones me to tell me that my mom is not doing okay. And basically that I should prepare myself for the worst. I never slept that night at all. Eventually, when I started dozing off, that Thursday morning, I eventually got a call, the second call from the nurse, to say that my mom had passed on. I'm sorry. I didn't think if I was ready to do this at all. As you can see, I'm not made up. I'm as raw. I don't have any makeup on, no fancy clothes or anything, because I wanted this to be as authentic as possible. Because I know for a fact that many people are going through this at this point in time. And people don't tell you how much work it is, physically, mentally, and emotionally, going through the motions of having to deal with the passing of a loved one, and more so the passing of a parent. I was and still am a mess, and the passing of my mother has really taken a toll on my mental health. I have struggled. I've struggled with seeing the bigger picture. You know, I know in the Bible, and usually people also sometimes say, when somebody passes on, they're going to a better place. which I would like to believe that my mother is now with her parents somewhere in heaven. And literally, that's the only thing that gives me comfort with everything. I was away from work for 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks. The 2 weeks before my mother passed, and a week and a half after her passing, because after that, it's the planning of the funeral, it's the planning of the affairs, planning of finances, and all that other extra admin that comes along with it. I never actually took leave this year. I didn't have any leave to take after my mom's passing. I started going to counseling at the end of October. And usually I'm a very private person. I don't like sharing a lot of my life with people if they don't need to know about it. I show what I want to show and what I'm comfortable with showing. But opening up to a psychologist is together one of the hardest and easiest things I could have ever done, and it's so difficult to explain. But I never knew how much I needed to say until I actually sat down and spoke about it. I didn't know how important it was for me to talk about it until I actually sat down and spoke about it. Looking back, and even now, for my future going forward, because I'm still a work in progress. It's still very raw for me, even 8 months later. But it's okay to not be okay. And usually I wouldn't do things like this because I just sometimes find it so corny. Like, how do people come on here and actually talk about their lives and start crying? But I'm doing this purely for the reason being is that we are in such uncertain times right now, and probably 70% of the world have lost people due to COVID. And there are so many people that are experiencing the same emotions, that are going through the same things, that don't know how they're gonna get up tomorrow morning. It's just, depression is real, and I never realized I was depressed until I actually sat down with my counselor and spoke about my experience with losing my mother. It's not something that shows itself on your forehead. It's not something that calls you on your phone to say, Jamie, you are depressed. Depression is such a weird place to be in, because you in a place where you feel like maybe this is normal to feel, but at the same time, I don't understand why I'm here in this place, you know? And it sounds weird because it's really difficult to navigate if you are in that space. I realized at the point in time that I needed to see someone when I didn't know how to deal with my emotions. I would just look at a picture of my mother and I would start crying. I would literally be okay sitting in my bed, and all of a sudden I think of something my mom and I used to do, and I would start crying. Which is not a bad thing, but also you don't want to go through your whole life crying all the time. So the main reason I wanted to come on here and share my story is because I know there's someone out there, whether it's 10 people or even just one person, that will be watching this. Losing someone is very hard. You will never, ever, ever get over it. I'm still dealing with it as I sit here today. I miss my mother every single day. And it might not even just be the loss of a loved one. Maybe work is making you depressed. Maybe your friendships are making you depressed. Maybe you just feel like you're not where you want to be in life, and that's what's making you depressed. Life will throw curveballs at you from different directions. And it's okay to sometimes feel down. It's okay to sometimes break down. It's very important to cry. It's very important to cry. But I advocate for mental health awareness, and I advocate for people going through mental health issues, people going through depression, because it's not a nice space to be in. This is not the first time I've gone through depression. Coming out of a past relationship a few years ago, I was very depressed, and writing helped me a lot in that instance, because I was letting go of a death of a relationship, and it's a death of a relationship that I didn't want to be part of anymore. And I kind of worked my way out of it by myself, on my own, without any help. But today, here I am, even 8 months later, dealing with the real death of my mom. And I just want to be able to touch someone today and let them know that it's okay. You are not alone, you know? Every day I think to myself and I wonder, would my mom be okay with me doing this? How does my mom feel about me saying that to that person? I wonder what my mom is doing today. I wonder if my mom is sitting next to me in the car as I'm driving. Like, all these things play in my head. And in a weird way, it kind of gives me comfort because I'm like subconsciously talking to her. But there are also facets of instances that happen throughout my day. It might not happen every day, might not happen every week, but there are small things that I pick up on. And then I think, oh, that's my mom. I know that's my mom. A song will just pop into my head or onto the radio, and that's my mom, you know? As important as it is to look after your body, be it with medication, if you're sick with the flu or whatever the case is, it's just as important to look after your mind. and anyone suffering with mental health. I think it's important to take the time and to realize it and to not be ashamed of it, and to know that even though you won't get over it, you can get through it. And it will be okay. It will be okay. I love my mom. She knows it. And I miss her every single day. But I know that she's with me wherever I go, whether I can see it or feel it. And I hope that whatever you guys are going through out there, I hope that you're able to get through it and walk through it. Because you'll never get over it. But that's also okay. Thank you for listening to my short story, which is not so short. But I'm hoping that I'm able to touch someone today and to know that you are not alone. And that there are people that are experiencing the same thing that you're going through, even though it might not be exactly the same. But the premise is the same. And I wish you all well on your journey to getting to a better place with yourself.